Brightman here with the Scarlet Faithful, coming to you late Sunday night. I probably listened to this Monday morning, hopefully Monday. Just want a few thoughts just on the big picture for Rutgers athletics following, obviously, the very disappointing and stomach punch loss against Penn State for football, the disappointing start for Rutgers basketball, and just kind of the reality of the situation that both programs are in from an NIL perspective, and really where I think the spotlight now shines brightly on new AD Keli Zinn and what it all means. So, this is a bit of a, I think, sicko podcast. I was going back to work Monday. I had to get up really early, and as I've kind of expounded over the years, I mean, when there's certain things on my mind or opinions I have about Rutgers athletics, it's like I can't really rest or sleep well or have peace of mind until I get it out there in the universe. And the whole thing is surreal as it is, having my own podcast and having, whatever following I may have. But I just felt a need to want to get this out tonight. And so I even, had to do some work tonight, but wanted to get this out and just say, I know emotions are high. I know people, it's kind of human nature to move on and make changes. And I just, I've kind of led into this a bit for a few weeks now, just when, things have flared up with football and Schiano and also, Pikiell and basketball. And I think the reality is this, right? Rutgers cannot afford to move on from either coach after this football season and whenever basketball season ends. It's just, I don't think an opportunity based in reality. Schiano is owed over, I think it's $23 million last time I checked after this season, not including his staff. Pikiell is going to be owed over $20 million. Regardless of what you feel about either of them, if you want both of them fired for performance issues, I'm trying to spread the word on what is based in reality. And I think what's based in reality is what makes the most sense for Keli Zinn and President Tate and this new administration is you have to raise as much NIL as possible to put both of those coaches in as strong a position as possible for the following seasons, because starting over is costly and they just don't have that type of money. I mean, it's not even, paying off the coach to leave. It's having the right amount of money to invest in both programs moving forward. And this is I think, a logical second chance or third chance or whatever chance you want to call it for Schiano and Pikiell. But in fairness, right? And people don't want to hear, NIL isn't that, that's not why they lost to Central Connecticut State. Correct. That's not why they blew the lead at Penn State. Correct. However, neither coaches had the NIL support that most other Big Ten programs have had during their tenure. So this is very much the spotlight on Keli Zinn right now to generate competitive NIL for both coaches, to give them the opportunity to show what they can do when given competent resources, right? And then if they can't perform, they can't win, then you're still boosting your program's potential and appeal to future candidates by proving that at Rutgers you can generate significant NIL. And I think that is really the big picture here is Schiano and Pikiell will have a chance to turn it around. Schiano's not even really a turn it around, right? It's more of a leveling off. And can he ascend once again in terms of his ceiling? And then Pikiell is very clearly, needing to turn it around. But if, just think of for next season, you're talking about, can Keli Zinn raise $10 million for these two programs combined? Could she get football 7 and hoops 3 or something to that degree? Again, this doesn't count revenue sharing, which is, again, decisions she's going to have to make. So it's not just about bringing in NIL and those resources. It's about making the most of the resources you have, right? What decisions is Keli Zinn and President Tate making from a distribution standpoint within the athletic department? Is football going to get 12 to 14 to $15 million in revenue share based on 5 to 7 million of NIL. And is Hoops going to get 3 to 4 million in revenue share and then get another 2 to 4 in terms of NIL, or are numbers going to be mixed and matched based on what's raised? There's a lot of big talk out there about, Zen being able to raise a significant amount of NIL for both coaches. I'm very big into right now, trying to better myself and reading a lot about, just self-manifestation and when you verbalize something into the universe, it becomes a reality. And I don't know, maybe some of that is what's happening here because, I applaud Keli Zinn and President Tate in terms of how they have come in very confidently. I think that they're building a very strong support staff around their vision. But again, it's very hard to get corporate sponsorship in New Jersey, New York, especially when your programs aren't winning. And I want to believe that they're going to be able to really generate serious NIL funding through corporate sponsorships. I still believe donors are a big part of this, and I think the other reality to this, right, about not being able to move on from Schiano and Pikiell is that, this isn't Illinois where you have $100 million donor. This isn't Indiana where, Mark Cuban and other big guns are funding a complete turnaround with football in Kirk Cincinnati and pouring tons of resources into there. Vanderbilt, look what Vanderbilt football is doing. Huge resources there being put into that program. Things can turn around quickly based on NIL funding. However, Rutgers has never been that type of place anywhere in regard to funding. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that can make a huge difference, but they're just not participating, and can Keli Zinn tap into that? Is she able to, generate that type of money? I mean, we've talked about Joe Agresti and, the Nick Saban's our auto dealer, partner in Baton Rouge. And, who knows what can be done there. And maybe she has an ace up her sleeve that we're just not aware of. But I think in terms of just looking at the way things are in daylight, I think it makes the most sense, right, to give as many resources as you can to Schiano and Pikiell and give them that support and see what they can do with it. And again, if they ultimately can't pull it off, then you still have built credibility and positive perception around your programs that you are going to support and give resources with NIL. You're able to generate that at Rutgers. And that is going to open doors for candidates that I don't think those doors would be open today if you moved on from Schiano and Pikiell. I just don't think it's reality. And, who knows? I mean, between having connections from LSU and West Virginia and, bringing in, people from Ohio State and, Brian Kelly's not at LSU anymore. And I'm not talking about Brian Kelly himself, but, maybe there's someone in his staff from a recruiting perspective, from an NIL perspective that LSU that Zinn can tap into that can help Schiano. This is an interesting stage for Schiano. Politi wrote about, being at a crossroads after his 6th year now, his second tenure. And, he's never really had to lean on an AD like this before. Like he needs to lean on Zinn in terms of, he keeps, professing confidence in the organization now and the plans they have and that they've been operating from behind for so long. And, this is essentially the mindset and the experience and the system in place now with Zinn and Tate that Rutgers desperately needs to compete in the Big Ten. And Schiano's been very adamant about that in recent press conferences. So, what other resources can Zinn bring to the table in terms of people to help Schiano be able to really make an impact with the NIL that he has? I think for both Pikiell and Schiano, it's not just getting the NIL, but it's having the bandwidth, the outside perspectives, the new context of different people brought in. Defensive coordinator is a huge issue for Schiano. offense is a huge issue for Pikiell. I think, how they address both those issues from a coaching perspective is going to be hugely important in their either success or failures moving forward. So, this is very much a huge moment in time early on in the tenure for Keli Zinn in terms of how she handles those aspects. And that is resources as well. So this isn't just NIL. It's navigating those areas of weakness that are identified within the programs right now, aside from player personnel, aside from talent. There are certain, Schiano and Pikiell have had certain amount of success at Rutgers in ways that modern coaches haven't had at Rutgers. So that, I think, itself lends credibility to their tenures. And as much as there is disappointment right now, and I'm right at the front, how disappointed I am with both programs. At the same time, they're your best option right now. They are your best option to figure it out. If you properly support them, if you give them avenues to improve, right, in terms of resources with coaches, recruiting. It's not just about handing them over a check, right, which is hugely important, but it's how you spend it wisely. Because at Rutgers, there's no margin for error. You can't, you're going to get in some battles from an NIL perspective, and you're going to have to hit and win, not only win those battles, but be right about who you're winning those battles over. And you need player personnel, evaluations, I think, for both programs have to get better, not just in the portal level, but a high school recruiting level. And, they need to be innovative. Rutgers needs to be innovative and find ways to be successful that isn't commonplace, right? They need an edge. So what is Keli Zinn going to bring to the table aside from just NIL dollars? And maybe some of those corporate sponsorships, maybe some of those donors bring other elements with them that help elevate those programs in other areas, not just straight NIL payoff. So we'll see. But I think as frustrated as everyone is, and all the fans have a right to be, and I've been pretty vocal about this, and I was pretty passionate last night in my, rapid reaction. I have been with basketball as well. And, it's Rutgers fans who've been through the ringer, and I think you can't, if they're relying on fans to push the needle with NIL, that's not going to be the case. And, I don't particularly love, and I've talked about this forever, and I used to be sponsored, by the in terms of NIL and Knights of the Raritan and that collective, and John Newman and those guys, and a great alums that really tried with no support from Pat Hobbs, and I tried to help promote that as much as possible. And I think my point here is that I never loved the idea that fans are responsible, right, for pushing the needle with NIL. And people, on Facebook, and doing surveys about who's donated or not, and you could generate support as a fan in many different ways, whether it's social media, whether it's season tickets, whether it's athletic scholarships, academic scholarships, our fund, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be NIL. And I think kind of, holding everybody to the table on how much have you donated NIL, and that, that is then equivalent to how you're allowed to speak or voice your opinion about things is just, I think it's asinine, to be honest with you. But my larger point is that, Rutgers doesn't have the type of financial support from the fan base. And that's not a knock. That's a reality, right? And we live in the most expensive part of the country there is, in the New York, North Jersey, New York City area. Albeit maybe San Francisco is the other. I don't have, actual stats in front of me, but there's a lot of factors here. There's all the pro teams. we don't have to get into that politics of it, but the point is, for Rutgers to be competitive in the Big Ten, and the whole idea of, the whole Patriot League argument and all this stuff. I mean, Rutgers belongs in the Big Ten. Academically, they belong in the Big Ten. Research-wise, they've proven to belong in the Big Ten. Athletically, Rutgers went into the Big Ten ill-prepared. And 10 years later, 11 years later, we're still paying the price for it. But I think there is some real hope here that, with Zinn and Tate and their experience at LSU and other Power 4 schools before their time at LSU together, that they get it. And it's a matter of what the Board of Governors can do. I think the Towers, Amy Towers gets it as well. Greg Brown's been around a long time. There's some serious people involved here. And, can there be the perfect storm here where maybe this discontent among the fan base, right, is going to pay dividends in the long run? Because I think, again, in terms of revenue sharing and all that, with the media rights and all that, it's not just about that. It's about ticket revenue. It's about game day sales, and if the way both programs, if they trend backwards from this current season for hoops and for football, you're gonna suffer there. You're gonna suffer there, and there's nothing worse to have amongst the fan base is indifference, right? That's the worst thing you could have. Outrage, increased expectations, disappointment. These are all good problems to have because these are all built off of winning at some point. And maybe Rutgers has never won at a high level consistently, but there are many, many, many people that care very, very much about Rutgers in many aspects, but athletics is certainly a big part of that for many people. And so that angst, that displeasure is all from the heart. It's caring. And I think that smart people get that. And I think there's a lot of smart people at Rutgers right now at the top. And I think they get that. Will that translate into success in the future by being able to generate the resources they need to compete? We'll see. But I think, like I said, fans have voices, right? And yes, we have the ability to contribute with NIL, but there's lots of ways to contribute. And a lot of people just can't, and the whole, here's $5, here's $10. Listen, you're competing against programs that are getting $100 million donations, $10 million, budgets of $10 million a year. So yes, the nickel and diming, certainly it all adds up, right? But Rutgers has to have a comprehensive, elevated approach in their fundraising, and there's got to be a real plan there. And it sounds like there is. So I'm excited to see the potential that it brings. But just going back to kind of the beginning, the whole point of this episode was that, those calling for the firing of Schiano Pikiell, and people are, saying to me, why aren't you calling for either to be fired? It's like, it's just not realistic. I don't think that it makes sense from a financial perspective. I don't think it's possible because not only is it just, paying coaches to leave, it's having the right amount of money and resources to invest in quality replacements. And I just don't think that structure exists. I think that you now have Zinn and Tate, and, Tate, I love how he tweets, and he was talking about how it's player retention. I mean, listen, KJ Duff is going to demand big money. And I don't even mean him. I just mean the market for KJ Duff. Antoine Raymond, and I apologize, my rapid reaction, I missed a lot of things yesterday. It was an emotional time. It was a busy day with the family. And, the offensive line, I was so pleased with how they were pushing Penn State around before that fumble. But Antoine Raymond had a tremendous game. I mean, his stock and KJ Duff's stock are sky high right now. And if Rutgers can't retain either player, right? I mean, it's not only about bringing in a new coach. You're going to have to bring in all these new players, right? Look at Cignetti, brought in everybody from JMU, and Indiana was able to afford it. Not every program would be able to do what Indiana did by bringing in all those highly sought-after players along with Cignetti. And if you're Rutgers, retaining Duff and Raymond are priority 1A and B in terms of your support of Schiano and the proper NIL and the proper resources you have. And if you lose both those guys, it's going to be very hard to go in the open market and replace them, even if you do have, whatever amount of money they may generate. So it's a critical offseason. It's a critical time to be a Rutgers fan. It's a critical time for Keli Zinn and President Tate. Just a few months into their tenures here, if we're going to know pretty quickly in the next few months what the ceiling is for NIL with both programs for this next year, right? And hopefully they can build on it year after year. But you have to be looking at this from two lenses. One is the present day and what makes the most sense, and that's giving Schiano and Pikiell the resources they need to compete. Do both have shortcomings as coaches? Yes, they've displayed that, right? But they're both good coaches. Whether you want to believe it or not, they're both good coaches. They both have shortcomings. Does a ton of NIL mask those shortcomings? Probably not. Probably not. But having more talent will certainly help that and raise the ceiling of both programs. And let's see what they can max out at. And then you build a program stronger for the future, right? And that's really, I think, the key. That's the second lens here. And how sustainable will this NIL push be for Rutgers? That's why corporate sponsorship does make sense, because if you sign long-term deals, you can really plan for the future and really understand how you're investing long-term in these programs. So I get it. I just think it's very challenging right now. It's just not good timing for Rutgers, but you have a lot of smart people in the room. They have to figure it out. And I think figuring it out with your current coaches in place makes a lot more sense than having to start from scratch and having to really raise probably 4 to 5 times more than what you potentially need to raise to elevate your current programs with your current coaches. So this is a little bit, shooting from the hip here. Just wanted to get that out and get the message out that's how I view things. As frustrated as I've been, as frustrated as you've been, at the end of the day, I think everyone has to evaluate the position that you're in life, right? In situations, and whether it's job or family or what it may be. And the grass is not always greener. And while it may be in the future, right, when you invest in some fertilizer over the next few years by bumping up NIL, by proving that, Rutgers has had a competent and credible level in the Power Four in terms of fundraising and resources and support and everything that goes into it, raises your ceiling in terms of the coaches you can get in the future and the belief that you can generate around your program, and it's got to start somewhere. And I think it makes the most sense for Zinn and Tate to go all in right now on raising as much as they can for the coaches they have and giving them as many resources and support as possible and see what they can do. And I know there's going to be skepticism to that sentiment, but the alternative I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's a sound strategy at the moment. I think the sound strategy is to give your current coaches the best support and resources and NIL money you possibly can. Thanks so much for listening once again here at the Scarlet Faithful.